So realized vol is kind of stair-stepping its way lower on Bitcoin as we consolidate. So back to around 30% on realized, and implies a kind of following suit. We saw about a 6 vol point drop in the front end on Bitcoin vol. You can look over here and see it's in the sort of mid to low 30s in the front end, which is historically pretty cheap. However, ETH, obviously, you can see from the OHLC charts, it just kept going. It did like 9 days, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, nine straight green candles, breaching the upside implied move multiple times. I mean, it really did go ballistic, right? And as a result, realized vols in the 60s still. Implied vol did pop about 10 to 15 vols on the initial move. It has faded back down again to be about unchanged on the week. But, you know, it's kind of in line there with realized. So there's no real carry in ETH. There's very minor positive carry in Bitcoin. But for the most part, implied and realized vols are kind of trading in line with each other. Okay. This does feel like a key inflection point in crypto markets right now, where altcoins are taking the baton from Bitcoin. And if this does continue, where for those of you who've seen alt season before, crazy shit can happen, right? So, you know, we're starting to see some pretty crazy shit already. But if alt season really has begun, we could see some madness in the likes of Ethereum, Solana, etc. Okay, Sui's going a bit crazy as well. For those of you who look at some of the other alts, and that's quite a popular one. So anyway, that's where we are. Pretty key moment in crypto right now. Looking at term structures, you can see we were inverted last week. We have kind of flattened off a bit on ETH, but obviously we were super inverted on the initial break. But you can see contango here back in Bitcoin, front end really depressed here as it, you know, ETH's done 30% and Bitcoin's just sitting there doing nothing. So the market's basically decided, all right, Bitcoin's found its level. Now let's focus on other stuff. You can see here on the time series, very steep curve on Bitcoin. You saw that inversion there on ETH with that red line up here. Front end got to about 80 vols, has collapsed back in line with the rest of the curve. So you've got a much flatter curve on ETH versus a very steep curve on Bitcoin. Looking at skews, Bitcoin skew generally hasn't done too much. Weekly went down to puts. It's kind of around neutral to slightly in puts right now. And the long end skew is minor for calls. But really the action was on Ethereum skew. Call skew got as high as about 8 vols in 1 week stuff. Back end stuff even got to about 4, 5. Sorry, when I say back end, I mean like 1 month. The real back end stuff didn't do too much actually. That's kind of stable at around 2. You can see that here in the term structures of skew. So this is like also showing the pink line, which is 3 days ago. So on the break higher, we did see Bitcoin go into call skew briefly, but the front has faded back to kind of neutral, where you've got from September onwards, we're at about 2 vols for call skew, and that decays down to around 1 vol in the back. And then it's a bit different on ETH, where you've got a big spike there up to 8 vols in the front. That has faded back to, you know, about 2 to 4 vols. You see here August at about 4 for calls, and that decays down to about 3 vols for calls as we go to the back end. And so that's the shape of the skew term structures. You know, no massive surprise that ETH call skew really catching a massive bid on that break. Here's the relative value. We've got an uptick again. Week on week, we're going from like sub 30 back to 40 vols in the front. So a big move back for ETH, 40 vols over Bitcoin vols in the front end. But look at the back end. If anything, the back end's come down, which is kind of nuts given the moves that we've had. So it shows you that the demand is not on the Vega side. It's very much on the Gamma side, right? If you look at what trades people are doing to get long ETH, they're either buying very short dated calls to get leverage, or if they're doing anything in the back, it might actually be a net Vega neutral or a Vega sale, like call fly structures and things like that, basically, right? So there's not this demand for like long dated December, March, June next year Vega that's hitting. We're already at a 20 vol premium to Bitcoin. To me, the vol market is saying it ain't going above 20 vols in the back end, right? That's about as high as we're going to let it go. And then the front end at 40 vols is where the action is, because that's going to reflect realized. Okay, so that's kind of how it's trading. Obviously, you can see here the spread on skew is very much ETH over all over the curve. with the highest point kind of in early August there at 4 vols. My ETH Bitcoin Vega spread obviously is in deck 25, sorry. So it hasn't hurt me from a Vega perspective. So the implied vol exposure hasn't hurt. The Vega exposure hasn't hurt, but the gamma obviously has, because ETH's ripped 30% in a straight line and Bitcoin's gone nowhere. So I've had to delta hedge my position as we've been moving higher in ETH. So I've been making prints to buy ETH delta to stay delta neutral as we've rallied. I've also sold some Bitcoin delta as we've rallied. So I'm delta neutral as we are. I've still got the Vega spread on. I did trim a little bit of the upside calls that I was short, just to kind of buy a little bit back because the Vega started to grow in Ethereum, and I wanted to keep it at a flat Vega, kind of net zero Vega trade. But basically, the way I'm looking at it is, yes, it's lost money. It hasn't lost a ton just because of I've been delta hedging it along the way up, and I didn't have loads of gamma on that position, which is good. But if we break 4,000, and that's pretty much going to open the door to new highs, then I'm probably just going to cut this thing and stay out of the way, basically, right? Because I don't want to, I don't want to get married to this position. And like, it was a view on Vega, but the market's moving too much. So then it's like, you don't want the gamma exposure, even though it's small. You don't want the additional gamma exposure. And at some point, if ETH goes to a new high, then the Vega might even catch a bid, to be honest, right? People will just be like, okay, this thing's crazy, and it might really go. So I'm going to keep an eye on it. Like I said, I've already delta hedged it, so I'm kind of running delta neutral on that spread. I think I'm down a couple of grand on it, something like that. It's not killing me. But to be honest, that was kind of what I wanted to make on the trade. I wanted to make 5 to 10 vols, and 10 vols would have been 2 grand, right? So the fact that I've already lost that money via what the gamma spread has done is not ideal. So I would look to, like I say, I would probably look to cut it if we do break 4,000. I don't want to let this thing really lose me much more. And then if we do get a pullback in vol, then obviously it will make some money back via the Vega remark. But right now, with the front end at 40, it's probably going to be a little while before that back end really starts to find any sellers. You probably need the front end to come back to 20 first, right? That's kind of how it works. All right, so that's where we are. Giving you an update on crypto vols and what's going on. But yeah, watch out for any dip in ETH, because it's probably going to be your last chance to buy before this thing has another go at the all-time highs. All right, guys, I'll catch you next week. Cheers.
Hi everyone, thanks for making it to the end of the video. Remember, this is just a little taster of what we do at Options Insight. To get access to all our research, including my in-depth vol market insights, flows and positioning report, and my portfolio trades, and a whole lot more, you can sign up at options-insight.com. I'll see you soon.